Good afternoon and welcome everyone to today's Trans-Tasman Business Circle VaxPop. My name is Luke Henderson. I'm the Program Manager for the Circle, and it is my pleasure to welcome our audience today. I would like to begin by acknowledging the original custodians of Australia and pay our respect to their elders past, present and future, for they hold the memories, the traditions, the culture and the hopes of Indigenous Australia. Over the past few weeks, the Circle has featured many top New Zealand and Australian business leaders supporting the vaccine rollout. In the coming weeks, we'll be featuring many more. These form our VaxPop series, Let's Get the Jab Done. In today's session, we are honoured to hear from friend of the Circle and chair of UNICEF Australia, Anne Sherry AO. Anne has had an illustrious career in both business and government sectors, so we're very privileged to have such a distinguished guest with us this afternoon. Thank you again for joining us, Anne. A reminder that we're on the record today and we welcome our attending media guests. We will publish the recording on our YouTube channel following the event, and you can view other videos from our series and share your thoughts with our series hashtag VaxPop. I will now pass over to our Chief Executive, Tanya Oziel, to get the conversation started. We hope you enjoy today's discussion. Over to you, Tanya.
Great, Luke. Thank you so much. And Anne, what an honour for me to be moderating today.
Thanks, Tanya.
It's great. It's great to see you, looking amazing as always. And we really thank you for your time and commitment to this and everything that you do. So on behalf of Johnny and I and the whole team, welcome. So let's get into it. So we're talking to you with your UNICEF hat on, but of course, Anne Sherry hat, always we love to hear from you as the person. So UNICEF is known for its rapid response during humanitarian emergencies. So how has this pandemic been different for the organisation?
Thanks, Tanya, and I acknowledge I'm coming to you from Gadigal land, so I pay my respects as well. How has it been different? In quite a few ways, actually. I mean, one is the scale of it. The second is traditionally UNICEF has been focused primarily on children, and vaccinating children has really been our job for the last, 70 years, and we're really good at that. But we are the agency for rolling out the vaccines for everybody. And so we've had to step change what we're doing from just focusing on children to a global vaccination program that's of an unprecedented scale. And the logistics of that are quite challenging. So I guess that's different. And of course, in the midst of all of this, we have continuing humanitarian crises. So we're doing the vaccine rollout, but we also still have Syria, Yemen, refugee camps of Rohingya and Bangladesh, Iraq, Iran, and now Afghanistan, plus all the other things that are going on in Africa as well. So I think that the biggest challenge really has just been the scale of the effort required globally to do COVID, as well as all the other stuff that we would normally be doing. But we've stepped up to the challenge.
Amazing. And honestly, like how UNICEF Australia is helping more globally, I understand you're playing a major role in many countries beyond Australia. Tell us about your Vaccine for All campaign.
The Vaccine for All campaign is to start to drive some conversations about vaccine equity and to make sure that vaccines become available, not just in our own community, which is where most of our domestic conversations have been about how do we get people here vaccinated, which is obviously really important. And that's been true of most developed countries. We've been focused on it, keeping our own people safe. But on our doorstep, we have Indonesia, where there's 2% vaccination rate. We've had vaccine issues in Papua New Guinea, where we're driving and helping deliver the campaign there. In the Pacific, we saw a big outbreak in Fiji. And so we moved in very quickly to Fiji to start to drive and deliver vaccines right through Southeast Asia. So the countries that are close to us, and in fact that many of us would think of as travel destinations as well, it's really, really important that for selfish reasons, those countries are safe as well for us to go in and out of. But for equity reasons, we don't want this to, we talk about being a disease of the unvaccinated in developed countries. We don't want that to be true in developing countries because they've got no access to vaccine. And so we're working very hard to get supply of vaccines, and there's increasing amounts of supply becoming available. But we do know that in many developed countries, vaccines are reaching the end of their use-by date and being thrown away, while people in other parts of the world are begging for vaccines to help reduce the disease rates in their country. So we're really the agent. You know, there's an alliance called COVAX, a COVID alliance, that's about pulling supply of vaccine into central locations and then distributing them to the developing countries, so that we don't have an us and them environment globally where the rich countries are fine and the poor countries are dying.
Unbelievable. 2% in Indonesia. I actually wasn't aware of that. That's incredible.
It's very low, yeah. And it's a massive, you know, there's a couple of billion people in Indonesia. So it's a, you know, it's a lot of people we need to get vaccinated.
Yeah. So places like the Cook Islands, and I know you're very, very committed to the Pacific, personally and obviously professionally. So Cook Islands have done really well. I think 96%, 98%. Yep. What about Fiji? Let's talk about Fiji, because that did turn around, right?
Yeah, no, it did. So where there's been really strong political and community leadership, as there has been in the Cooks and in Fiji and in a number of the Pacific countries, the vaccination rates are high. And we've worked with community health delivery agencies who people trust to take vaccines out. I think our biggest challenge in our immediate regions, Papua New Guinea, where social media has been very, very destructive, I guess, in terms of confidence, and lots of lies spread. I mean, it's very similar to some of the anti-vax campaigns we've seen here, but they've taken hold in PNG, and there's not much alternative voice for many of the remote communities in PNG. So literally we've got people taking vaccines out to communities with local leaders, probably not dissimilar to what we've had to do with Aboriginal communities and Indigenous communities here. Until you've got someone locally who is pro-vaccine, government or UNICEF or anybody else telling you this is good for you, is not going to work if your social media is saying, you know, this is terrible and they're injecting terrible things into you, and, you know, a bit of Bill Gates or whatever it is people are saying. All that madness actually makes people frightened, and you know, that's not a good space to be. So that's really our challenge. And I guess the other challenge in the Pacific, because we had a measles outbreak not long before we had a COVID outbreak, is that we've also got to keep focused on all the other childhood diseases that we vaccinate for. And there's a bit of a risk that COVID takes over everything. And the reality is COVID is an adult disease, and the vaccines are in adults' arms at the moment primarily. And but we've got kids also who are prone to and susceptible to many other diseases, and we've got to keep doing that at the same time.
So with Fiji, I mean, I did see that, you know, Qantas announced flights to Fiji in December, which is like, oh my God, amazing. Do you see that, how successful that has been? And do you see that happening?
Well, I hope it's going to happen. And I think in the same way as we worked with New Zealand to get the, you know, the travel bubble going, we tested that before, of course, we closed again. But we know what's required to make those things work. And for people in Fiji, where tourism is such an important part of their economy, the motivation to get vaccinated is extremely high if that means tourists start coming, because people have not had jobs. We saw food riots there 6 months ago because people had no money. I mean, it's a very, very difficult situation in most of the Pacific countries because of the importance of tourism to their economies and therefore the well-being of their communities. And they're hugely motivated. They really want us to reopen, and I'm hoping and hopeful that we will. And I think Qantas has put the stake in the ground, and good on them. You know, great that they've taken the leadership up on this point as well. And so yeah, let's see, and let's hope it happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, even the Cook Islands announcing that only vaccinated people can come into the Cook Islands, that was a big call.
Yeah, and I think we'll see more of it. Those vulnerable communities are aware of how quickly a disease like this could ravage them. And, you know, what seems like maybe a hard line, I think is going to become more common.
Yep.
Because the idea that it's okay to be unvaccinated and you can choose to do whatever you like is really being put to the test if you could, in fact, destroy a remote community, which you could. And so I think safety first is probably going to be the mantra. And we're seeing that with plenty of employers in Australia. Plenty of other places are also saying, this is one of the, even the US is saying if you're vaccinated, you can come in.
Yeah.
But if you're not vaccinated, then don't come. So, that's, I think that dynamic we're going to see much more broadly.
It's good. It's good. And so with your Trans-Tasman hat on, so let's turn to business. What are the major differences you're seeing between the Australian, the way we're doing it in Australia and the New Zealand sort of the way that they're still looking at an elimination strategy rather than management?
Look, I think the reality of, there's no Australian way at the moment.
Well, yeah,
there's a theoretical pathway which some have signed up to, and it seems not everybody has. So that's our first challenge, is we don't have a coherent Australian way. I think, and New Zealand obviously is still looking at elimination, and they've managed that. I think when it changes is when you get an outbreak you can't get on top of. So Victoria had an elimination strategy until the last outbreak, which just took off. Yeah. And so I think the dynamics of the Delta strain have changed it in some places, but not in others. So it sort of depends whether you've had the outbreak or not. It may well be that New Zealand only wants vaccinated travellers going forward as well. If they're going to maintain that position, that might be a part of that. They haven't flagged that yet, but we watch with interest. But I know that there's plenty of pressure coming from business and others in New Zealand, and tourism in New Zealand, saying, please, 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 this is such a big part of our GDP, find a way of making this work. And then on the Australian side, we can't even move around Australia yet. So I think we also need to work out how and when that's going to happen and what the requirements are going to be if once we get to higher vaccination rates. And, I've been vaccinated since June, so I'm double vaxxed since June. So I'm dying to go somewhere and to have some acknowledgement of the fact that being vaccinated probably means that I'm less likely to get sick, and even if I get Delta, and also less likely to spread. So I think we've just got to work out better systems domestically as well as on the Trans-Tasman, because it's been a long time. People are getting sick of being locked down on both sides of the Tasman. I think that pressure's building in Sydney and in New South Wales and Victoria, as well as in New Zealand. But finding new rules of engagement that allow us to work together, I think, is the secret of success. And we continue to talk. So we're still talking about it. We're still trying to find those pathways, find the nuance that works, find the rules of engagement that make it work. And once we do, then we'll press the button, hopefully.
Well, we'll applaud you here publicly on all your work that you did for the bubble. So if you could do that, I'm sure you'll be very much involved in getting us connected again, because everything.
Well, as you know, it takes a lot of tenacity. You just got to keep at it and at it and at it. So, yeah.
And I'll never forget you, like last July, you were like, yeah, I think the bubble will be open by the July school holidays. And that was in 2020. So we can just hope for better days. So Anne, you join a chorus of business leaders now coming out talking publicly about the vaccination and how important it is. I think, from our perspective as the leading business organisation across the Tasman and of course Singapore, we absolutely honour the voices that are coming strong and fast and hard. It's needed. It's working, obviously. 80% vaccination rate, I think, first jab in New South Wales we hit, or 83% we've hit. Yep. 80% in Auckland today was announced, which is fabulous for first jab. So things are moving, and I think your voices are being heard. So what would you say to your fellow CEOs and business leaders out there who haven't yet, joined the bandwagon?
Well, I think we all need to talk about how important it is and think about how important it is inside our businesses as well. I think the conversation about our duty of care of employers as employers is gathering momentum as well, so that it's not just about us respecting individuals' rights to do whatever they like, when that right might impact on customers and fellow workers. You know, I'm in the camp of, you've really got to be clear about what you require of the people who work for you to keep themselves, their co-workers and their customers safe. And clearly that's to be vaccinated. You know, I think the more we all speak about it with one voice, we need to be louder than the people who are speaking against it. And given they've become a smaller and smaller group, they're still making a lot of noise. Yeah. And we essentially need to be louder than them, and to be giving people confidence that this is what's required to start to resume something like you know, whatever a normal life is going to be beyond where we are now, but certainly to get us all out of lockdown, moving, get our kids back to school. I mean, the big challenge that we're facing with UNICEF as well is in developing countries, kids who've been out of school for 2 years, that's a desperate issue. And of course, kids even in Australia, in lower socioeconomic communities, it'll be true in New Zealand as well, who've had a lot of time out of school in their last couple of years of school, we potentially lose those kids to the school system. And that's not a good thing either. So we've got to get focused on how we get them back to school, how we get them reconnected with their friends, and try and stem some of the mental health issues we're seeing, and get our businesses flying again by having people able to work more collaboratively and to see their customers again. So we've got a lot at stake now, and it's not just about dancing around who should and who could and who shouldn't and who wouldn't. It's about being, I think, really clear about what we need as a community to move forward. Yeah. And that's to get a jab.
Get a jab. That's why we're doing Vax Pops. Vax Pops. So before I hand over to Johnny to do the vote of thanks, so what are you most looking forward to? What does that vaccinated future look like for you?
Well, it's probably doing a bit of travel, given that's my background and I feel so passionate. It's getting out to the Pacific, actually, whether it's wearing my UNICEF hat, because I've been trying to get to PNG for 18 months, or it's literally just as a traveller to go to one of the most beautiful parts of the world and spend some time on one of the Pacific Islands, chilling out and feeling as though, you know, the world is reconnecting again.
Beautiful. All right. Well, thank you, Anne. I miss you.
Thank you, Tanya.
New Zealand, and I'm handing over to the boss. Johnny, over to you.
Thank you so much. As Tanya said, the series has been out of the Circle support for all the Australian companies pushing for vaccine adoption and rollout. But we wanted to include UNICEF Australia because your role is never, ever always understood, and particularly your role in this vital global endeavour and the role that Australia is playing. So we pay tribute to Anne Sherry, the chair, but also Tony Stewart, the CEO, for UNICEF's incredible work. We wanted your voice part of the series. And I want to take this opportunity to thank Anne Sherry, the person. You know, you have been for years a leader and a pioneer in business and community, whether it's Indigenous, female leaders, specific sustainability. You were there long before they made up ESG as a term. And you can be proud of what you have given to the business community and our wider community for so many years. We pay tribute to you for that. We pay tribute for your current role, and we pay and enjoy your Pacific holiday. And the final word over to Anne.
Thank you very much, Johnny. And I should pay tribute to the team at UNICEF as well, because this is a global effort. Amazing local team here in Australia who are just on this 100% of the time. And also our role with COVAX and CEPI, which is the group Jane Holton co-chairs globally. This is a partnership. This is not one organisation. It's everybody with their arms and shoulders to the wheel to try and make sure that we've got vaccine equity globally, and that now that we've discovered how interconnected we are as a world, how we can all start moving again safely around the world in a way that, you know, I guess connects us again physically, as opposed to just feeling connected because we've all got the same disease. It's not a good way to be connected, really. But thank you for the platform today as well. It's really important.
And thank
Thanks,
you everybody
Anne.
for joining.
Take care. Bye,
Bye.
everyone.